A boy loses his entire family before he turns 20. A century and a half later, his name sells for $10 million at auction. A single handbag. Thierry Hermès was born in 1801 in a small German town, the son of an innkeeper. Nobody in his family worked with leather. Nobody made saddles or harnesses. There was no family trade waiting for him to inherit. No name behind him worth anything at all. Then the wars came. Disease and violence swept through Europe in the wake of Napoleon's campaigns, and by the time Thierry was in his early 20s, his parents were dead. So were most of his siblings. He was alone, with no trade, no family business, and no money behind him. So he did the only thing he could. He went to Normandy and apprenticed as a saddle and harness maker, starting completely from zero. For 16 years, he learned the trade one stitch at a time, with no shortcuts and no inheritance to fall back on. In 1837, at 36 years old, Thierry finally opened his own workshop in Paris. Horses were how the wealthy moved through the city, and every nobleman needed a harness, but Paris already had harness makers on every corner. Thierry needed something none of them had. He found it in a single stitch. Most leatherwork of the time used a machine-sewn seam, fast to produce, but weak. If one thread snapped, the whole seam could unravel in your hands. Thierry developed something different, a hand stitch using 2 needles and waxed linen thread pulled from opposite directions so the tension held itself in place permanently. If one thread broke, the stitch didn't fail. It was slower to make. It was also nearly unbreakable. Word spread through Paris the way it does when something is simply better than everything around it. Thierry's harnesses reached the hands of Emperor Napoleon III himself, and Empress Eugénie became a loyal customer. By 1855, his workshop had won the first-class medal at the Paris World's Fair. He won it again in 1867. An orphan with no craft, no name, and no family business behind him, had built one of the most respected workshops in Paris. Thierry died in 1878. The business passed to his son Charles-Émile, who moved the workshop to a new address on the Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré, the same address Hermès still calls home today. Then it passed to 2 grandsons, Adolphe and Émile Maurice, who ran it together as brothers. But the world outside their workshop was already changing under their feet. By the early 1900s, cars were starting to replace carriages on the streets of Paris. Every harness maker in the city was staring down the exact same crisis. The animal their entire business depended on was disappearing. Adolphe read the writing on the wall and stepped back from the company, selling his share to his brother. Most businesses built entirely around horses simply died with the horse. Émile Maurice refused to let that happen. He traveled to North America, and there he noticed something small and mechanical almost nobody in France had paid attention to yet: a sliding metal fastener, the kind used on car hoods and military equipment. He brought an exclusive patent for it back to Paris. The French didn't even have a word for it yet. They simply started calling it La Fermeture Hermès, the Hermès fastener. Around the same time, in 1922, Émile Maurice's wife complained that she couldn't find a handbag she actually liked. So he built her one himself, adapting an old saddle-carrying bag his own workshop had designed decades earlier for horse riders, the haute-à-courroirs, and fitting it with his new zipper. That bag became Hermès's first women's handbag. 3 decades later, in 1956, a young actress named Grace Kelly, now the Princess of Monaco, was photographed carrying that same lineage of bag, holding it up against her body to hide the fact that she was pregnant, before the news had gone public. The photograph ran in Life magazine and traveled around the world. Women everywhere started walking into Hermès boutiques asking for the Kelly bag, using her name for a product that didn't officially carry it yet. Hermès didn't formally rename the bag until 1977, more than 20 years later, once there was no longer any doubt what the world was already calling it. Then, in the early 1980s, lightning struck twice. Hermès' chairman, Jean-Louis Dumas, was seated next to the actress and singer Jane Birkin on a flight from Paris to London. Birkin went to put her old straw basket in the overhead compartment. It tipped over and everything inside spilled into the aisle in front of him. Embarrassed, she told him she'd never found a leather bag spacious enough or practical enough for a working, traveling mother. Dumas didn't just sympathize. He picked up an air sickness bag from the seat pocket in front of him and sketched a design right there, mid-flight. In 1984, Hermès released it as a real product, and with Birkin's permission, gave it her name. 4 decades later, in July 2025, Jane Birkin's own original prototype bag sold at auction for just over $10 million, the highest price ever paid for a handbag in history. An orphaned innkeeper's son with no craft and no family name behind him built a single unbreakable stitch by hand. His grandson looked at the end of an entire industry and found a zipper instead of a funeral. And 2 chance encounters, a pregnant princess hiding from cameras, a spilled straw basket on a plane, turned 2 ordinary bags into the most expensive objects a handbag has ever been. That's the part most people never learn about Hermès. The name didn't start in luxury. It started with a boy who had nothing left to lose,